Oh, I was like, what's happening? And,
My chat.
and I'm so glad you're here. This is one of my favorite events that we do, and this is a special edition of our Human Trafficking Awareness Panel. It's very special because today we're a part of Molly Curry's Legacy Project, First Lady Molly Curry's Legacy Project. I just want to give a quick overview of how the evening is going to work. We have people on Zoom, so hello to our Zoom and online people, and it's being live streamed to Facebook and YouTube. This is going to be recorded, so we can also send out a recording of this if you want to pass it on to anyone at the end. And we're going to have, it's going to be interactive tonight. And part of the interaction tonight is we are going to have on in front of you, if you're in person in front of you, there's a QR code. If you're online, the QR code will come up on the screen, and we just need you to scan that using your phone, and it will take you to a website, and that is where we're going to do our polls from. We're going to be doing some polling and asking you questions, and then that's also where you're going to submit your questions. So as the evening goes on and you have a question, we're going to have you submit it into that website. And then at the end of all this, we're going to take the questions at the very end. The staff is going to be collecting the questions, and at the end they're going to feed me the questions that came through there. So that's the technology of the night. It's a very, for me, it was a very big deal to figure out this technology. And we're going to hear from First Lady Molly Curry, and then we're going to go through the panel, and then at the end we'll have time for a Q&A. So that's kind of the overview of the evening. The restrooms are in that back corner, and if you need anything to drink, feel free to get up. You just might be on camera on Zoom and record it. So I'm just going to give a little overview of Rethreaded. You are in our Dolores Bar Weaver campus of Hope. You're standing on 2 acres and 36,000 square feet of hope. And what we do is we provide long-term employment for women who've experienced human trafficking. And while they're employed here, we provide wraparound services, everything from group therapy, one-on-one counseling, to financial repair, whatever a woman needs to reclaim her life, we walk with women to reclaim their life. And we have helped, I think now it's over 100 women. 100 women in direct employment, if not it's close. And it's awesome. Right now we currently we have 17 women in our work program. And yeah, you can applause that. And one of the biggest gifts that Rethreaded gives is time and community. So women can come to Rethreaded, they're employed, they're learning skills, but then it's 3 to 5 years women can stay at Rethreaded. Because this is not, the complexity of human trafficking and what it takes to reclaim your life takes time and community. So that is the gift that Rethreaded gives. So, without further ado, I'm going to brag on Molly Curry for a second. Molly Curry is a certified public accountant who practiced for 8 years with an international accounting firm. She credits her family as the greatest asset of her life. She's a full-time mother to 3 children, aged 13 to 17. As a champion and longtime advocate for ending the terrible cycle of human trafficking, Molly recently launched the First Lady Molly Curry Legacy Project. The Legacy Project aims to empower women and girls to achieve their full potential while providing survivors with the resources to reignite their hope and healing. And in addition to this, Molly has led and participated in events and activities hosted by Duval County Public Schools, Blessings in a Backpack, the Jacksonville Children's Commission, Generation Works, Monique Burr Foundation for Children, the Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville, Nemours Children Specialty Care, the Jacksonville Symphony, the Jacksonville Zoo and Gardens, the Tom Coughlin J Fund, and has served as a board member for us, for Rethreaded. And she is equally active in her church at Southside United Methodist Church. Our First Lady is awesome and does so much. So we're going to play a quick video highlighting the Legacy Project, and then Molly is going to come up and tell us more about what tonight is and the educational piece. When we started this work, there was no language for it. We didn't have language for human trafficking. We just knew something was wrong. And now we're standing on our campus of hope, and we're about to have this art installation that's going to draw in thousands of people to become educated on the topic of human trafficking, and will raise up people to actually do something about this problem. So it has been amazing to watch the journey that this issue has taken on, and see the community rally behind it to bring change.
I selected human trafficking and Rethreaded as the focus of my legacy project because I care deeply about finding a solution to this problem. Through this education art initiative, visitors will be able to personally connect to the women whose stories of survival have been shared, so they too can become advocates for ending human trafficking.
So the inspiration for the mural design that Kate and Kenny and I created was the survivor's journey, basically from the beginning, which feels hopeless, to the end, which feels very inspired and empowered and hopeful.
We brainstormed, we probed for what was meaningful to the ladies, that what symbols, what metaphors expressed their journey from where they were to how their life has changed in Rethreaded's program.
The journey from the darkness to the lightness is my experience, because I know what it's like to be in the dark for a very long time, but I also know what it's like to be in the light now. So, and that's what it is for me.
Knowledge is power, and through this educational piece, people will be able to know and understand more about human trafficking and the journey and healing, and it's available to all. And so including our community in empowerment and understanding is such an important piece.
The community and how important it is for survivors to have that community of women around you that you know just has your back 100%. And I believe that it definitely shows that.
My hope is people will come away not only educated, but also inspired to make a difference. Art brings people together, like at museums, dance performances, and this installation. Art can improve communities, inspire conversations, and educate individuals. Art can also work by drawing focus to issues like human trafficking.
I had somebody that saw it yesterday, and he asked the question of, what is that? And I was able to share so far what the impact is. So I think the more people that see it, it's going to have a bigger impact on our community as a whole, because it's beautiful already, and it's just started.
The organization and the people that support the organization care so much that they wanted to create a work of art which represents the survivor's journey, and as well as the Serenity Garden, which provides the survivors with a safe space to process their feelings and emotions and just find peace. So I think that the power of public art, you know, will show them how special right off the bat, right when they drive in, that this organization is.
The art should really speak to everybody. You know, any visitor who comes on the campus, women who are survivors of human trafficking, I think as soon as they come here, there's the wow factor, like, wow, people care. People care about us. People care about me enough to do all of this.
I am so thankful for this project, because it has been beautiful to watch our women be able to tell their stories and then it be turned into something so transformative. And what that does for a woman to be seen and her story to be validated, and not just validated, but used as a tool to help other women also on their journey. So I am most excited for the internal transformation that this art brings to our awesome women that work here at Rethreaded.
Hey there. I first want to thank all of you guys for coming out tonight, whether you're here in person or you're at home watching it. That's taking the first step to be educated and to be an advocate for human trafficking. And as you saw in my video, I mean, showed a lot of the artwork, but another side was the education and to educate the citizens here in Jacksonville on human trafficking. So part of it was to try to get every business in Jacksonville to take the pledge to train 100% of their employees on how to spot and report human trafficking. So this being here tonight, I applaud you and hope that you then take this training and take it back to where you work, take it to friends, take it to neighbors, and get them engaged also. My Legacy Project supports the Attorney General's effort to raise awareness of human trafficking here in Florida by encouraging interested businesses and individuals to register at the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking. And to give you a little statistics, as of August 2022, approximately 6,000 individuals have been trained already, which is amazing. Over 40 businesses and 520 people have participated in the training experience, and 5,400 City of Jacksonville employees have taken the City of Jacksonville human trafficking training. So thank you again for being here. I'm sure you will hear a lot tonight about training, and you can always go to Rethreaded's website, and there's links on how to get trained on there. So thank you.
Just needed to do a little stage change real quick. Am I doing this right? This is where I need to go? Okay. Go. Okay. So like Molly was saying, the Attorney General has put a challenge out to the state to join the 100% Club. So she partnered with the Florida Alliance Against Human Trafficking. They developed this amazing 1-hour training. And so tonight, what we're doing is taking that training and we're breaking it down further. So I just want to get a show. A lot of people gave the code out and were like, if you could take this training before you come, that would be great. Has anyone taken the training? Oh, great. Okay, this is good. So if you haven't taken the training, at the end of this, we're going to put up a different QR code that gives you the link to sign up to take it, and we'll send you all the direct links you need to get to the trainings. And training is, education is so important because there's so many misconceptions about human trafficking. Like, what is it really? There's a lot of myths, so tonight we're going to also, a lot of the myths will be broken down through our panel of experts here. I'm gonna go ahead and just introduce them really quick. We have Jody Coleman, licensed mental health counselor and trauma specialist. Lakeisha Burton, retired JSO police assistant chief. Stephanie Patton, assistant manager of business development and survivor advocate. And Aaron Wolfson, assistant state attorney division chief of SVU and human trafficking homicide attorney. So I'm going to have you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves and kind of tell your role in this work.
Oh, I guess I can. Okay, I'll start. I'm Erin Wolfson. As Kristin said, I am a prosecutor at the state attorney's office and really did not know anything about human trafficking other than what you see, I guess, in television shows and movies such as Taken until 2016 when Melissa Nelson took office and decided to have a prosecutor dedicated to human trafficking, and that ended up being me. So I have worked on human trafficking cases since then, prosecuting them, working with survivors of human trafficking to expunge their records, have learned a lot about the problem, and worked closely with law enforcement as well as nonprofits such as Kristin and Rethreaded, and I'm also one of the division chiefs of the Special Victims Unit at the State Attorney's Office.
My name's Stephanie. I am the Assistant Manager of Business Development here at Rethreaded, and so I work in fundraising and development. And what I think is fun about that video is I did get the opportunity to be a part of the creative process of that art piece, but what I didn't know was that I would get to own the
the part where I actually get to train or introduce all of our companies that come into Rethreaded to volunteer. I get to introduce them to the training, and I also get to walk them through that art piece because I absolutely do believe that knowledge is power. And I heard it, and I was like, oh man, and I'm sitting on this panel at the same time. So it was really cohesive for that. So yeah.
Awesome. Good evening. My name is Lakeisha Burton. I am a retired assistant chief with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I am forever an advocate for victims of crime. So I just wanted, Kristin said that we were experts. I just want to go on record. I'm not an expert of human trafficking, but I am an expert of my own personal experiences, and I'm excited to share that tonight. I met Kristin 11 years ago. I was a sergeant patrolling on the north side, and when I met her, I was so excited because I had been working with women that were prostituting on US 1. So when I met her, I was very hopeful that there was somebody that cared and there was resources that I was able to provide to people that needed it the most. So thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Jody Coleman. I am a licensed mental health counselor with a private practice here in Jacksonville. I do contract work with Rethreaded. I've done that for the past 3 years. And as I'm sure all of us have, we've all have our different reasons for being part of like the human trafficking like movement. And it's something I've been passionate about for a long time, and then happened to stumble upon Rethreaded in college, and then circled back 3 years ago and had the opportunity to work with them as a clinician. And so I've learned a lot about human trafficking and trauma. I do a lot of complex trauma at my practice, and it's an honor to be here.
So we're going to start off, we're going to give a definition of human trafficking. Human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, and coercion to make a person perform a sex act for profit. So you notice there's nothing in there about moving someone, there's nothing in there about the location, the change of location, that this is the definition, the use of force, fraud, or coercion to make someone perform a sex act for profit. And there's 4 stages of human trafficking. We're going to go through these 4 tonight. There's recruitment, which is basically when the trafficker is identifying the vulnerabilities of a victim. There is the grooming, which you're building, with the traffickers building trust with the victim. There's the actual trafficking, which we just talked about, the implementation of the force, fraud, or coercion to perform the sex act. And then there's immersion, and this is like when a person submits to the life. Like this is when basically a woman is broken and submitted to her circumstances. And we're going to divide these into 2 different sections, and then at the end we're going to talk about the impact of education on stopping human trafficking. So we're going to start with recruitment, grooming, and trafficking. And we use the word in the life. That's the word we're choosing. That means that's what we refer to when you're in human trafficking, and you are in the life. So that when we say that, that's what we mean when we say in the life. We are going to start off with a quiz. So on your phone, if you pull up that webpage, it should pop up a quiz. I'm hoping this all goes smoothly. You should pull up the quiz, and the question is, according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, Florida ranks what in the country for reported cases of human trafficking? And you put your answer in the web thing. It's not an app. What do you call it? In the technology. I think it would be an app. App is right. Yeah. Yeah. And then Angela, do I just say now and then it goes? Okay. Okay. There we go. Oh, doesn't have the answer? This is the next question. Oh, that's the next question. It's going to go smoothly. It's going to go smoothly. Back to the panel. Okay. Did it come up on your screens, though, the question? Okay. You were able to answer? Okay. That's the most important, really. The answer is 3rd. That out of the whole United States, Florida ranks 3rd in reported cases of human trafficking. And the video, the training video, goes into stats, and these are from 2018. Human trafficking is happening in our states and city. There was 1,117 victims identified in 2018, 506 traffickers identified, and 306 trafficking businesses. And this is just like the tip of the iceberg, because as we will learn, it is hard to identify people who are being human trafficked a lot of times. And Stephanie did more research for the 2020 numbers, and the number of victims has doubled since 2018. So it's over 2,000 victims that they've been able to recognize. And most people think, when they think of human trafficking, they think it's kidnapping. That's how people are recruited. Like, you see all those videos on Facebook, they're like, this man followed me in the store and I thought he was going to kidnap me. And that is rarely how it happens. Usually only about 5% of human trafficking cases is abduction. The other is the use of force, fraud, and coercion to perform a sex act. And the trafficker takes people through those 4 stages of human trafficking. So what I'd like to start with is the recruitment stage. So this is the stage where the trafficker is looking for vulnerabilities to enter into a relationship with a person. So what vulnerabilities could a trafficker be looking for? What puts a person at risk for being trafficked? And we'll start with Stephanie and go from there.
Yeah, so the video talks a lot about traffickers assessing individuals, right? So individuals are being assessed. So this is where a trafficker maybe pinpoints you in an audience. He's looking at you and he's like, man, what's that vulnerability? And it can be something as big as like homelessness, right? Like, oh, this person is homeless. There's a vulnerability I'm there to exploit. Or it can be drug and alcohol addiction. That can also be exploited. Homelessness is a pretty obvious exploitation or vulnerability to be exploited. And there's also those vulnerabilities that most of us carry with us. And it's that desire or that need to belong, right? To be wanted. Maybe I'm vulnerable in a way where I just am looking for partnership or relationship with somebody, and I'm just lonely or alone, and the wrong person says the right words, and because he's assessed that vulnerability. So those are some of the, I feel like Jody could probably follow up on that one a little bit more.
Yeah, we, coming off of that same idea, we talk about unmet needs when we're talking about vulnerabilities, and the video kind of talks about there aren't any one specific like criteria where it's like, this is the person that is the targeted person. We're talking about unmet needs that we all have, needs for attachment, needs for bonding with other humans. And like Stephanie mentioned, some physical needs, physiological needs as well, but really anyone can be a target if they have the unmet need for attachment and connection with other people. And as Stephanie put it, kind of recognizing they could say the right words and form that bond and meet that need, and that's that recruitment stage. Now there's an element of loyalty that gets created, and he's meeting a need, he or she is meeting a need for me.
And I'll just add, I've talked to many young ladies throughout my career, and you'll see a lot of young ladies dressing provocatively, and they're looking for attention. So I think that's a vulnerability that individuals look for, because a lot of times they associate how a young lady dressed to low self-esteem a lot of times. So they have these conversations and to make them feel good about themselves, and that attention is important.
Anyone else? Yeah. I know I just read a stat that 60% of kids that are in the foster care system end up in human trafficking. Kind of like what you were speaking to, the need to attach. And usually when you come out of foster care system, you have been up and taught the healthy way to attach.
Yeah, can I add to that too? That need for attention. A lot of times publicly we have this like connotation of like that being a negative thing, like they just need attention. When in fact that's like a need. That's a like mental wellness need that we have for attention. That's an element of connection that's very important. And so we, a lot of times with young people, we assess this like, oh, they're looking for attention, and we view that in a negative way, but in fact that's an actual need that their bodies and their physiology has. And so a need for attention is not anything to be looked down upon. That's something that we all actually have as needs.
That's great. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So the grooming process is stage 2. This is the process and the training that was talked about as gradual conditioning used to reset the mindset and behaviors. So this is oftentimes when the grooming gives gifts and starts to form a deeper relationship with the person they're trafficking. So how have you guys seen the grooming process take place? And what are some of the traffickers' tactics? We were going to start with Erin.
So the grooming process, and grooming is a term that's used often in the human trafficking world in terms of investigations, but also in child sex abuse cases because it's done there as well. But it is the act of gaining trust of this person, and the individual who ultimately is the one being trafficked oftentimes doesn't even realize it's happening because there's subtle changes in that relationship, whether it's giving extra gifts or more attention, more time, things like that, that over time this builds up to where the person does not even realize they are in the situation they're in and doesn't identify as someone who's being trafficked.
Yeah, the very purpose of grooming is for it to feel comfortable. So us identifying it is really challenging because it's supposed to feel comfortable and makes them feel attractive and makes them feel all these very lovely feelings. And so it's really hard for us to catch anything at that stage because it's not abrasive. It's not meant to be abrasive.
And I think that goes perfectly kind of when you're talking about the vulnerabilities, and the vulnerability has been assessed, and now that it's been assessed, and now the trafficker themselves is meeting that need in that grooming process. And so all of those needs are being met, that attention is being met, or maybe that you're being fed regularly, or you're being housed now, or drug and alcohol addiction does qualify under the force, fraud, and coercion term. So maybe those needs are being met for you, and you're not struggling in that way. That's a whole different thing, but so it's these needs are being met and you're feeling a type of safety, right? So now I'm feeling safe, I'm feeling okay, I'm feeling comfortable, and it can be a long time before anything is even forced upon you or asked of you, or whatever that situation may look like, depending on if it's the use of force, fraud, or coercion. But the grooming process can be a long period of time. I think, Erin, you were kind of saying that we've even had experiences with stories where a trafficker would spend a minimum of a year. There's an incredible return on selling a human being. They talk about it in the training video. It says a trafficker once told them, you can sell guns once, you can sell drugs once, you can sell a person over and over and over again. So a trafficker will invest time in that grooming stage in order to get the return.
I remember one of our ladies told the story, a year of a romantic relationship, and slowly over the year, cut off ties with the family, started to twist family relationships, and over a year, created isolation, but in a love relationship with trust. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, no. I've never seen the grooming process as it relates to human trafficking, but I started thinking about my experiences as being a survivor of childhood sex abuse. I think they groom you. It's the most manipulative space that you can be in. So in my case, it was the gifts, it was the gaining of trust, but also he understood that I missed my biological father, so he tried to fill in that gap. And before you know it, you become this victim of this crime.
Right. Absolutely. And like you said, Kristin, too, they shift the normalcy, right? And so through that gaining of trust, the normalcy starts shifting. And there's a cutting of ties. There's that beginning stages of exploiting the other vulnerabilities, where now you're starting to rely on me, and that's a articulated part of the process of grooming, is shifting what feels normal to the brain's experience.
And I would assume so confusing. I mean, at this time, I don't know, you're gaining trust. It's so in kidnapping, you're taken from somewhere violently and forced into this situation, which feels very obvious that this is happening to you. But this is so underhandedly, manipulative, and so it would be so hard to recognize.
Yeah, so slow and subtle.
Slow. Yeah, it's subtle.
Well, and I think it becomes, as opposed to kidnapping, where you would be in a fight or flight mentality and reacting in that moment. With trafficking and with grooming, it's just your daily existence. And so it's what your life is. It's what you learn to be as your day-to-day normal life is the world that the trafficker has created for you.
Yeah. Anything else? And then it comes to trafficking, the actual use of force, fraud, or coercion for the benefit of the trafficker. How have you seen or experienced traffickers use force, fraud, or coercion to exploit vulnerability? Lakeisha, we'll start with you.
Okay. So when I looked at this question, I started remembering when I was young. I was 16 years old. I was a single mother, had experienced childhood sex abuse from the age of 11 to 14 years old. But I left home at 16 and I was in survival mode. So for a long time, I didn't even know that my life story was even associated with sex trafficking until I understood the definition. And my story related to sex trafficking from the definition where it talks about it was the exchange for food and a place to stay. So I had found myself homeless with my son, and I remember this adult man offer me an opportunity to get off the streets. And I was sharing with the panel that I remember being in a hotel room sharing my heart with this individual about all the transgressions that had been made against me in hopes that he wouldn't want anything in return. And I remember him saying, "Okay, are you done talking?" And in that moment, I felt like I had no choice, but to give in. But then when you think about what could have potentially happened if I wouldn't have given in. So it wasn't that I was forced or it was fraud or coercion, you can tell me that, but it was more so I felt like I had no choice, and if I had not gone along with it, it could have turned very violently for me.
Yeah, that makes me think of the fear of force, right? And so in our brains, what's imagined and what's real is the same neurological experience. And so the fear of force to your brain activated a system wherein that force may as well have been happening, in terms of your brain's responsiveness. And so it doesn't always look like, again, that force and that that sweet talking coercion. It really is the reality. It's such a unique experience, and it's so individualized. Every survivor has their own version of what this actually looked like, and that fear of force being an actual real element that robs you of your choice in that moment.
And I was just going to piggyback, or not really piggyback's the wrong word, but with Lakeisha, what you saying, I don't know if it was by force, fraud, or coercion, but I can't tell you the number of times that in the work, and the years I've done this work and meeting with survivors, that they have said the very same thing, where they're like, well, I wasn't really forced to, it was just this is what happened. But yet their trafficker had their driver's license, had their birth certificate, had their social security card, had everything they would need to actually go be on their own and live, a normal life, a healthy life away from their trafficker. And through, that's one example of what coercion is, as defined in the Florida statutes, which is holding on to someone else's government ID, passport, any document like that, as well as what I think Stephanie mentioned, which Florida, we're fortunate that this is part of the coercion definition, and that is providing a controlled substance to the individual. Because so often we see drug dealers realize, what Stephanie mentioned, that they can make so much more money off of an individual than having to constantly re-up their supply of drugs. And so they instead exploit the vulnerability of the survivor, the person they ultimately traffic, who has a drug addiction oftentimes, and they use that and they control them by providing them just enough drug, whatever it may be, whether it's heroin, cocaine, to not get dope sick. And so they give them just enough to keep them from getting dope sick as long as they continue making these dates and doing these dates in commercial sex acts. And that in the state of Florida allows us to prosecute trafficking cases through that piece of the coercion with the drugs.
Sometimes I hate that the word force is first, because I feel like a lot of times we get caught on that word force and we think of this violence that's happening immediately. And even in the training video, it talks more about the grooming process, and it says, and sometimes the person will be broken, which is the use of force immediately, right? They're broken to the life. And so, and just sharing from my own experience, and that vulnerability being drug and alcohol abuse, and being brought in under fraudulent circumstances, right? Being told, hey, you're homeless, you're alone, you don't know what's out here, you've never experienced this, I'll protect you, right? And it wasn't even necessarily the offering of the drugs that I was, addicted to, but brought in under fraud, right? I'll protect you. That's what'll happen here. And then coerced into continuing to stay through the drugs and the alcohol. And then eventually, when I was ready to leave, forced. So force was actually the very last tactic that was used in my experience. So sometimes I hate that word force is first, because I think we really get caught up on the idea that there's going to be, because it's so much more subtle. And I think that's, again, where we have a lot of women who are not identifying and not acknowledging or recognizing that fraud and that coercion piece. I think that I'm just going to change it around myself.
Coercion.
I'm going to write
broad coercion for us.
Yeah. Stephanie. Can you change the wording of this law, please?
Yeah, sure.
Can we delve into that a little bit about it's a very long, providing a controlled substance is outlined in section 1. Like, when did this become a law? And then I remember one of our ladies saying to us, I couldn't see a client, a customer, turn a trick if I wasn't high. So like the drug dealer would book them an appointment and say, you have to go do this, and then she would have to buy drugs from him. It just makes me so mad when I think about it. Like, how have you seen this law help survivors? Like, is this something that you're using in court and it's being successful? And
I would say so, and so I cannot tell you when that became part of Florida's law. I can look it up.
It's recently, though.
And tell you later. But for example, I'm also cross-sworn as a federal prosecutor for the very purpose of being able to prosecute human trafficking cases in the best court we can in terms of what the penalties will be, and for that particular case, where that case should best be prosecuted. And in federal court, controlled substance, this further definition of coercion is not part of that. And so there's other kits, in the federal laws that we use, such as transporting someone across state lines just for the purpose of prostitution, that we can charge the individual with. But in Florida, this has greatly helped because, as Stephanie was saying, the force and the violence oftentimes comes later and is far more subtle than what you would imagine it being. In most cases there is an element of force, force and violence, but the coercion being what Kristin mentioned, which is the drugs and really preying on that person's vulnerability and their addictions. And like Kristin said, it is the drug dealer who then becomes also the trafficker by giving the person, and in my experience it's been women who I've dealt with here and in my time at the state attorney's office, but giving women, knowing what the drug is that they have a severe addiction to, and giving them just enough, and they are making them buy the drugs from the trafficker and then running up a tab essentially, and then having to perform the sex acts, give all their money back to the trafficker just for a little bit more of the substance that it is that they're addicted to, while also providing the hotel room, so housing or a little bit of food here or there, but never actually keeping any of the money from these dates that they're forced to do.
Anything else?
I think we see that a lot, this overlap between substance abuse and human trafficking. I think when we look at that from a mental health standpoint, substance use is a coping mechanism. It's an inappropriate coping mechanism. It's unhealthy, but it works, and that's why it becomes a problem, because it does make dates accomplishable, and all of these things where the inhibitions leave and all of that sort of thing. And so we see a really deep interaction with substance use with human trafficking, because sometimes it's part of the exploitation phase, and sometimes it's part of that immersion phase. But we tend to see those overlap really, really drastically because of the reliance that it creates. And we've seen some where traffickers, if it is really forceful and abrupt, then they do get them reliant on a substance so that they can't leave. And so even if it does kind of start in that forceful thing, we do see substances used later on to allow them to cope, but it really builds that dependency, and it builds that relationship with the trafficker as well. So we see a huge interaction between those often.
So what is something about the trafficking process that you want our audience to know that is different from the public perception?
So,
Just give me the look, Stefan.
because I think, like, we're hearing it, you know, we're hearing the drug and alcohol abuse, the substance abuse disorder, right? This is classified as a disorder. And a lot of times, you know, we're thinking that there's choices to be made, that this person is making bad decisions, or, you know, they could be making different decisions, and, you know, we're really implying that there's better decisions to make. And so we have a person here, we have an individual, a human being who is suffering, whether it be from homelessness or mental illness or economic, you know, insecurities, or, you know, the mental health, all those things, they're suffering from this. And we have another person who sees that and they exploit that vulnerability, right? But they have all of these sufferings here and they don't know what choices to make. Maybe they don't have better choices to make, right? Like, I'm homeless, I'm hungry, I'm addicted to drugs and alcohol, I have nowhere to go, and here comes this person that offers me a solution. Without that solution, I have no other solution. My other solution is to call the family that's disowned me, that I don't even, I remember, you know, being on Arlington Expressway. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm walking down Arlington Expressway, and my family is from the beach. I grew up at the beach, and I didn't even know where they lived. They had moved. I didn't have a phone number to call. It's an incredibly lonely place to be, right? It's an incredibly lonely place to be. And I'm walking, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and a cab driver picks me up. And this is when I learned that nothing in life is free. Absolutely nothing in life is free. I thought he was just out of the generosity of his heart giving me a ride, very similar to what you had said, but nothing in life is free. And that's when I learned, that's what I learned that night, and that's what I took away from that. And I was vulnerable, and I was alone, and I was scared, and I was afraid, and somebody saw that. I didn't have another choice but to stand on the side of Arlington Road until what? My only other option was to get into that car. And so this is the illusion of choice. If you had seen me, you would have thought, man, she could be doing something different. My only other option was that cab that pulled up on me at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so this is the illusion. This is the illusion. That was my only option. And had there been a better decision to make, I wonder what that would have been, and I may have taken that option, taken that route. So
I think that's one of the most common misconceptions, is that victims, they choose or want this life. And I think that this is why education is so important, so people can stop being so judgmental and re-victimizing victims because of their misconceptions.
yeah.
I hear it all the time.
Anything else? Okay. We're going to do another quiz, so get out your phones. The quiz is, how much money does sex trafficking make globally? So put your answer in. If you've been around Rethreaded a lot, you might know this.
If you've talked to Stephanie.
I know, I want you to break it down. 'Cause I can never do it. All right, everybody got their answer in? Okay. I can't see it.
No.
All right, can you put up the correct answer? Yes. Yay. $99 billion. Well done. Yes, $99 billion. The commercial sex trade industry makes billions and billions of money a year. That is why traffickers get into this business, so they can make money. So a lot of people forget that human trafficking is a business, and is a business based on the exploitation of people's vulnerabilities.
Can I talk a little bit about it? Because I do a little bit of a comparison that I think is super important, especially with the Jags win. We'll go ahead and bring this one up. I often compare it to the NFL, because I really think the NFL is big business, and because I own 15 Jags jerseys, right? Because we get a new quarterback every year, and I'm like, I'm going to keep buying these. And so I thought that was really big business, right? And so in 2018, the NFL generated $8.1 billion. So in comparison to, there's a significant difference. And I'm a very curious person and a very simple math kind of gal. And I took $99 billion and I divided that by 365 days in a year. And it's $271 million that is spent daily on the purchasing of people. And so that is what that $99 billion really looks like.
And again, I just want to remind you, you can also use the technology thing to put your questions in. So if you're listening and a question's triggered, put it in the Q&A section, and it'll be sent to our staff. All right, we're going to go to Immersion next. So once in the life, women are then kept in the life, and it's called Immersion. This is when the victim submits to the life. This is also when trauma bonding is in effect. And this is also the stage where most women do not recognize themselves as the victim of human trafficking. That word is not in their orbit, it is not in their language that they're using. So can you guys speak to this stage? What is happening, and what is, especially from a mental health perspective, what is happening? Jody, can you start that?
Yeah, when we talk about immersion, we're talking about that like submission into, right? And so there's that like acceptance of normalcy, basically, acceptance of your role. This is your life now, basically. And that like trauma bonding lingo, what it really means is like our brains are experts at survival. And if we're creatures that bond, we're creatures that, kind of going back to what we said, we have a need for attachment, we have a need for connection. What our brains will do very naturally is attempt to bond to meet that need. And when we're in a situation where it's very traumatic and someone is abusing us, even if we subconsciously understand that we don't have any sort of control over the situation, our brains will exert as much influence as possible to try to grasp for control. And so through that bond, if I anticipate his needs, if I know what he is expecting of me, and these sort of things where through our bond, through what I know of him and what I understand of him, and I'm using him generally, just because that's my experience with what I work. But again, with that trafficker, if we bond to them, then I have some sense of control about what's going on. Then I have some sort of sense of influence, scope of influence now. And so the brain will do that as a survival tactic to meet the need of bonding, because it's not a real bond, but the brain gets to accept it as a bond. And it meets that need of survival because now I have a scope of control where there was no control. And so, and kind of going back to that illusion of choice that Stephanie was talking about, when survivors are in this mode, this immersion to the life, they're in that survival mechanism of the brain. And so that midbrain, once we're in that, that neural activity cuts off a lot of activity to the neocortex, which is where we do rational thinking, decision making. This choice that we talk about exists in the frontal lobe of our brain, and we don't have a lot of access to that when we're in our survival mode in our midbrain. And so when we're saying there's choice, but we're really actually engaged with the part of our brain that can't make rational choices. It literally does not have access. That part of our brain also holds a lot of our personality. And so we talked about this before too, where women start making choices they never would have. And I would never do that. I would never say that. I would never do any of these things. But it's because they don't have access to much of their personality. They're in that survival mode. And so all of these ways, once they're immersed in that survival mechanism of the brain is where they're at most of their time, most of their days. And it's all part of that. It's our brains being experts at survival. It's appropriate for the context, but it also, just to kind of speak to what the role I play afterwards, it's a lot of what we try to do afterwards to recover, to regain access to these parts of our personalities and things like that when we spend such an enormous amount of time in our survival mechanisms, which is just not the way our brains were created to spend our day to day to day to day.
Wow. I would just, were you about to say something? No, go ahead. That in my experience too with prosecuting traffickers and investigating these cases, that more often than not, the trafficker has more than one person that they're trafficking. Mm-hmm. And there oftentimes are numerous women that he has, and whether if it's in a hotel room, a couple hotel rooms he has going. And one thing I think that truly shows the trauma bond that can be formed is that when a trafficker, in the cases I've worked, has multiple women he's trafficking, one of the women is closest to him and is actually helping him control the other women. And that's just because of the level of bond that he has developed with her. And I think that really shows what Jody was explaining.
So I have a question for you. So I'm thinking, it's almost as if you live in this normal life in an abnormal situation. So in my case, I was a mother. So I knew that the individual I was involved with, that was abnormal. But I spent a lot of time and space realizing that I was a mother, you know, so that made me feel normal.
Yeah.
You know, is that the mental health?
Yeah, it's, yeah, that what is normal, really. And we, like, that's that question of, like, our brains accept what is normal based on what we're familiar with. And so that's also why we see a lot of these things coming out of, not always, but sometimes out of childhood traumas, because there's already a normalcy of force and coercion. There's already something normal. And so it doesn't feel as abrasive as someone who was raised in a securely attached home. That normalcy, that dichotomy is way more abrasive, but when there's already a normalcy about it, our brains accept that. Our brains want what's familiar. And that's also what we see with trauma. We almost become addicted to the chaos, and so peace becomes very viscerally uncomfortable for people coming out of life because their normalcy is chaos. It's what their brain is most attracted to at this point, once you hit that immersion stage.
And I just will propose a thought. I don't even need the answer, but what if I feel like in a lot of our criminal justice system is about punishment, and instead of the deeper picture of what is the effect of trauma over your lifetime, and where and what is the possibility of restoration? Because if you're in trauma, it's like it steals your ability to be rational. And if that's over and over and again for years and years, you're rewiring your body to where it's almost incapable. And then I feel like without a chance for restitution, it just keeps the cycle going for people. And without time and space and community, it doesn't heal. Sorry. So in the video, they do a good job of explaining what are some signs of human trafficking. So we're going to put those up right now. Insecure or fearful behavior, signs of physical abuse, not in control of documents, when asked, hesitant about giving answers, family relationships not clearly established or defined, missing school or work, bruises or injuries, trying to hide them from view, expensive gifts, large amounts of cash, inappropriate attire for age or event, signs of depression, anxiety, or nervousness, physical exhaustion and working long hours, any mention of pimp or boyfriend, and a controlling boyfriend or girlfriend, sometimes much older. Can you all please elaborate on signs of what someone is being trafficked? Did people see the signs when you were in life, and what are some of the signs that people missed? And we'll start with Stephanie and go from there.
Yeah. People often ask this question, what are things that I need to look for? It's so broad. Like this could define, I mean, and if you watch the training, there are many other different things that would be a sign that someone is being trafficked. So really what I can speak from is like my personal experience, and then experience with working with others who have been involved in exploitation. And so people did not see signs that I was in the life because I was underground. I had disappeared completely. And so, and maybe that was a sign that was missed, right? Maybe that was a sign. Where has she gone? She's completely disappeared off the face of the earth. This was somebody who I grew up at the beach, so you know, big space, small community, and I was completely gone. So, but nobody was seeing me. I wasn't out in the public. Nobody was seeing me, you know, walk in and out of retail stores, or I wasn't, you know, shopping at, you know, the local mall or anything. That just wasn't in my day-to-day activities. So the signs weren't there to be missed as far as being out in the open in the public. Like if you were looking at me, you wouldn't have seen anything because you wouldn't have seen me in general. I was really hidden. I moved a lot. I was moving every 2 to 3 weeks over a 2.5-year period of time. So I was gone a lot. So I guess the only people that probably really would have noticed would have been my family. So I think when looking at this, yeah, that's.
So for me, I wrote down some things because I really was very thoughtful about these questions. So I wrote that back then, I mean, that was a long time ago, I'm 47 now, but people defined and labeled me based upon what they knew of me. They knew that she was a survivor, they knew that I was a teen mother, and they labeled me as a troubled teen. So that was their focus, not what was happening to her or what could potentially happen to her. And I think that's something that we have to start looking at when we look at individuals and we begin to judge. We need to think about, what's happening and what could potentially happen. And then what are the signs that people missed? Just like you, they were invisible. I had learned to suppress my emotions, and I had mastered the okay look, And so it was hard for anybody to see those signs. But when that happens, you're so easily to be isolated, you're depressed, you have low self-esteem. So again, this is why this training is so important, so people can know what those signs are, especially those who are closest to you when they are, they appear different, their actions, their emotions are different. I just think that if people that knew me the most were more attentive, they would have been able to see through all that I had suppressed.
I think you said something that's super important, is that you were defined by the labels that you had been given by what people knew about you.
Right.
So it was missing school or work, right? Maybe she's just flaky, or she's a troubled teen, right? We're just labeling people by what we see or what we think that we know of them. So,
so there's a lot of inaction
Yeah.
on people when they
Yeah.
see that.
Absolutely. I think
And
you
it
said
gives-
that well.
Yeah, and it gives these crooks, these sick people, this opportunity to take advantage.
Yeah, I think you said that really well.
So it's all, I'm just gonna repeat what I'm hearing. So it's almost like our own judgment of people stops us from seeing the signs of human trafficking. Is that a definition? Yeah, that's really good.
And not only human
It's
trafficking.
really convicting. Yeah.
It's not only human trafficking, it's domestic violence. It's other crimes as well. So
I know, and I think that sometimes we want this list so that we can go out with a list and be like, oh, I think that's what it is. And I think as you get educated about this topic, it kind of shifts how you see the world.
Yeah.
Like when you learn about the underlying issue of trauma, when you learn about the underlying issue of the score, the trauma score, in your life, and you start to learn about all these deeper issues, what's happened in my life, it has switched my lens that I see the world in. So really, I think as you're educated, that means the way you see the world needs to flip as well. So, so how about, as a prosecutor and a trained police officer, what have you been trained to look for when you're running a case, and how have you seen it in your work, practically in your work on that side of it?
I'll jump in. As Kristin alluded to, these cases are extremely difficult to prosecute. They are extremely difficult for a number of reasons. First of all, you hardly ever have what is presented in what are all the crime shows? CSI and Law and Order, all these ones that in 45 minutes the crime has happened, it's solved. There's so many things happening that are digital, and DNA's back, and graphs, beautiful graphs, things are done that I would love to have in a courtroom, but I oftentimes have the victim, and I have the person saying, this is what happened to me. And our job, and we work hand in hand with law enforcement, with JSO, FBI, is to corroborate that person's story and what has happened to them as much as possible. And that is how we're able to prosecute these cases. And it's done through finding, what hotel they were at. Is there a receipt, what's called a hotel folio, for the room they stayed in? Whose name is on that? Is it the trafficker? More often than not, it is. Or is it one of the girls he has? Finding the ads that are posted of these women on the platforms that used to be Backpage, now it's Skip the Games, among other ones, where ads are posted for these dates. Looking at social media, it's amazing to me what criminals post on social media, especially with traffickers, where you corroborate what the victim has told you, where she's like, I was at this hotel, my trafficker likes to drink, I had a case like this, likes to drink Ciroc. We did a search warrant on his Instagram, and there were photos of him at this hotel, same time frame, with bottles of Ciroc. I think it's a vodka, maybe? I don't know. I don't know, but just things like that that corroborate and give credibility to what she is saying happened to her. And that's how we have been able to prosecute these cases.
And I'm happy to say that I think back in 2019, the new law that came, that was passed, it requires all law enforcement officers to have training, at least 4 hours of training, and we need more though, 4 hours of training in human trafficking, and then all our new officers, they have up to a year to have the training as well. So when I started back in 1999, we never heard the term of human trafficking. So obviously with more education and the scenario-based training that we have, and officers sitting down and talking to actual survivors, it changes their lens, you know. So not only are they're more conscious of when they're doing these investigations, they're showing a whole lot more empathy for victims, and I think that's important because, you know, can you imagine being a victim of a crime and the police officer come and they have this like warrior mindset instead of a guardian, so it makes a difference. So I've seen it.
Well, and I think it's been crucial too to being able to prosecute these cases because it takes a long time for someone to identify as a survivor and actually tell you who's a stranger, you know, whether it's the police or coming into my office and they're like what am I supposed to be telling you about, you know, and it's their everyday life. And so it takes a lot of, we call them like almost touch points with police officers, where there are some detectives and their job is human trafficking work, and they, along with some of the vice detectives, they meet these women if they're on the street in hotels, wherever they are, over and over and over again, so almost there's a familiar face for them, and that happens, you know, multiple months go by, years go by before the person's ever willing to actually, first of all, recognize what is going on in their own life and be able to talk about it and trust the officer or detective or, you know, worker that comes out to the scenes too, or the mental health counselors, and actually disclose what's actually going on.
Yeah. So what the training has done is help police officers who are responding to these calls. It has helped them not re-victimize victims. You know, I remember when I reported that I had been being sexually abused, and my first encounter with a police officer was a female officer, and she stood over me and she said, "You're lying." You know, so I shut down, but there was another police officer who witnessed this, and he asked her to leave out of the room, and this officer, he kneeled down to me and he looked me in my eyes and he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Listen, I believe you. I'll make sure that this individual never touches you again." So you can imagine that first officer, I would have never said anything, you know. So it's important for officers to establish that rapport. This is the most critical time in a victim's life, and you know, to come and encounter somebody who's been involved in such a horrific crime, and for the police to say, you know, "You're lying," that's re-victimization. And I think a lot of that went on over the years early on just because the lack of knowledge and training. So the fact that we have this training and knowledge now is so beneficial.
So what should someone do if they do suspect you see human trafficking?
I would say call one of these numbers. Do not go intercede yourself. And that's the truth, that you are messing with, as Stephanie has mentioned, and it's been brought up a lot, it's this trafficker's business. It's what he's doing. There is lots of violence involved, oftentimes firearms involved, and it can be a very dangerous situation, especially if the individual does not identify as being trafficked at that point in time.
So, because one of our women her case was started because one of her friends like saw her at a gas station. She was acting funny and called in and did a report, and that started her case. Wow. So yeah, we always tell people the non-emergency, and you can call and you can be anonymous. And if you do get a license plate or a name, you can give that to them.
What if someone approaches you, comes to you, and they're mean, they come to you, they give you some kind of signal or a sign. I mean, are you, I mean, is it okay? I mean, you know, it's just like on the TV shows where they come, you know, you see them where they motioned or signed or had a sign or something that said, help me or whatever. Is it okay to help them?
Yes.
If you can get them away from their trafficker, get them in the car and take them to the...
Yeah. Well, if you feel like somebody's in immediate danger, always call 911, you know. So, and gather that information and share that. As much information that you can share with the police or the dispatcher is helpful. But any immediate danger, call 911.
Because we do get this question a lot, and I always encourage, because it is a very dangerous situation, and I was having a conversation with somebody else very recently, and we were talking about this question, and thinking about like proximity. What is your proximity to this individual that you suspect is being trafficked, right? Is this an individual that is in your family, that is your friend, or maybe a child of a friend of yours? Like, what is your proximity to this person? Can you develop relationship with them? Can you interact with them on a different level? Not necessarily trying to intercede, but can you just develop relationship with them and love them and meet them? Maybe they are suffering from drug and alcohol disorder. Maybe they are having some other issues that are underlying, but this is somebody that you know and you suspect that this is happening to them. You don't necessarily have to call, 911 in that moment, but maybe you can just develop relationship, and maybe you can just kind of see them where they're at, instead of labeling them by what you think you know about them, or assuming that they're making bad decisions. So I think that that's all super cohesive into that. And so how can and again, it depends on the situation, the circumstance, the proximity of relationship with that person. So how do we meet people and see people and love them, and remove all of these different barriers that we have in this space?
Yeah. To add to that really quick, that like if they're in your proximity, like a lot of times we forget to ask people questions. Like you can just ask people things about themselves because you care about them. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times, even when like that troubled teen type of label, a lot of times we ask questions and expect just like them to yield, and we go like, why don't you want to go? And so we're not actually asking them, why don't you want to go? We're looking for them to yield. And so instead, can we ask the question, like, why are you so resistant to that? And I'm kind of referring to something in the training that I thought was really profound, where there's this, even when we're asking questions, are we really asking questions? Do we really care to hear the answer? And if we care for humans, then we could get better at asking them questions instead of just expecting other people to yield to our labels, our expectations, whatever that is.
Okay, so I know that each of you have been implementing trainings in each of your organizations. In the state attorney's office, we've done training with you. Mm-hmm. In JSO, and at Rethreaded. Jody, you have taught other outreach about trauma and what it does. So how have you guys seen training and knowledge change and help stop human trafficking?
Well, I think so much of it is awareness, and just like you all being here tonight and learning more about it and understanding more that it's a far more complex problem and situation than I think what is often portrayed in movies and TV shows and things like that. And so I think just becoming aware of it, the deeper level, I should say, of trafficking. And then also even like within my office with Kristin having come in and done trainings, like the younger prosecutors know if there's something, in the cases they come across, if they feel like something's not right, or if a defense attorney approaches them, like we will talk to that individual if they want to, meaning, the defendant in their case and the younger prosecutor's cases, whether it's like a petty theft or a drug charge or a prostitution charge, that we talk to them, those individuals, and try to find out if there's something more going on, and really taking the time to inquire and ask questions about what's going on, so we can help them if that's where they're at in their life and wanting help.
So for me, just the training and the awareness, prosecution is essential, but also partnerships with nonprofits that do the work. So Kristin, thank you. what you do is so valuable, and I think from a law enforcement perspective, we can do a better job with partnering with the various nonprofits in our city. Because we often say in law enforcement that we can't do it alone, but we certainly have a lot of nonprofits that do the work. So stronger partnerships is good.
I think too, like we said, of education, it shifts the worldview, right? And so it's not necessarily about knowing the information, it's about how that changes your eyes to see the world. And I think once we shift that worldview, we talk about like rehumanizing people. I think the real thing that we do when we're talking about human trafficking is someone's humanity has been stripped from them. And I think if we talk about this type of education where it's more nuanced than that kidnapping craziness, you know, when it's more nuanced, then we can see the humans that are really at play here. And we kind of breezed over this, but just to, they talk about this triangle in the training of like all of the elements involved, and every piece of that is a human. The buyer is a human, the trafficker is a human, and the survivor is a human. And so if we get educated, we have the power to really start asking the questions, how did they get here? How did all of these elements get here? We can rescue women, and we should and we must, and we rehabilitate. And we also treat these other elements as the humans that they are. How are little boys growing into adolescents, growing into men now trafficking other humans? And so we get to really, once we educate ourselves on what's really going on here and all of the nuance, then we can start addressing the issue deeper than just this punishment side of things that we've been talking about. And we can actually get to like shifting the world, shifting our own worldviews and shifting the world.
Beautiful. Do you have anything?
I mean, I get to introduce this video to, and I think we've done over 500 people. So we've introduced over 500 people to the first 20 minutes of this module training, and so I've had the opportunity to just watch eyes open and really get to learn about what's happening in their city, in their state, what's happening to their sisters, their daughters, their aunts, what's happening to their people. And so I have gotten to see a change in the people in the city of Jacksonville and the people who come in and through Rethreaded, and I mean, and even in the culture here at our organization, right? Like, because these people are coming here, they're showing up and they're saying, hey, we see you and we serve with you. And the more people that serve with us here, the more lives we get the opportunity to change. And the more of you that know what's going on in your city, and the more of you that have the opportunity to take this message out and continue to share this knowledge and this information, the more lives we get to change. And I think Jody, you know, really just dropped the mic on everything. Like, let's get down to root causes and conditions. Like, what's really going on here? And I think and it starts with knowledge. It starts with knowing. If we don't know, we don't know. And you can't do anything if you don't know, but now you guys know. So hold you to a higher standard.
I know, and my friends, I call them educational opportunities with my friends. And like my friends, I can watch them over the years as I get to educate them on something they say, and they have changed their language, they've changed the way that they think about this issue because they're interacting with you. So when you gain all this knowledge, you will be able to shift people's lenses in this conversation and create more compassion, a different way of seeing the world that's beautiful. So really quick, we are going to hear from a company who implemented, so Ashley Moody's challenge, First Lady Molly Curry's challenge is for all the businesses in Jacksonville and all the individuals to commit to take this hour-long training and get yourself educated. So this is a company who's actually taken the training, implemented it with all their employees, and they've taken Rethreaded's Reclaim the Light volunteer experience. So we're going to hear from them real quick. And this is the time, if you have questions, put them in your phone right now, and it's going to go to our staff, and then we're going to do a Q&A session.
Hey, my name is Stephen Freeman. I'm the leader and founder of Kairos Digital. We're a marketing agency here in Jacksonville, Florida. We decided to become part of the 100% Club because the problem of human trafficking in Florida is massive. We're one of the leaders in the country, and Jacksonville is one of the leaders in the state. And so for Jacksonville businesses and Jacksonville business owners, there's a responsibility to make sure that we're taking care of our people and make sure that they have the information they need in order to be part of the solution. The reason we did the training is because when you think about the problem of human trafficking, a lot of times it feels like it's too big or it's too overwhelming. What this training does is it gives you and your team an actionable first step, which is awareness, being able to identify, being able to address it. The way we decided to implement in our agency is to make sure that each person on our team had access to the training, and then they were able to complete it during work hours on their own time. So we didn't have everyone sit down and do it all at the same time, but we gave people the freedom to be able to implement it when they need, which is really helpful based on varying work schedules. In the training, it was really helpful to be able to understand what some of the signs were, to have some of the resources, to be able to identify them, to understand the impact and the actual, to have a better understanding of the problem. So if you're considering becoming part of the 100% Club and taking your team through this training, I would highly encourage it. It's something that is incredibly impactful, and it actually is an actionable step that you can do. And I would even challenge business owners, it's part of your responsibility as a business owner and a leader to lead the front for your team in this. So I highly encourage it, and I'm asking you to please do it.
So that was Stephen there from Kairos Digital, a local marketing firm in town. So that was, they've actually come and volunteered multiple times with us and super highly involved. So we're going to let you guys ask us some questions. So Heather, we're going to take a question from the audience first. There's the microphone, Heather. So Heather, does anyone have a question they want to ask first in the audience, and be brave and get us, and then we'll ask some questions from online in the app, the tech thing. Anyone?
I posted one online, but I can ask it.
That's great.
Hi, can you tell us how Jacksonville treats Johns or buyers? Is there a Johns school? If so, is it in lieu of punishment? And what is the typical punishment for a buyer?
Great question. Great question.
Is there a place for the Johns? The jail.
So I will say, when, and this is, I'm sure, Lakeisha, you can speak to this too, but to do stings to get Johns is very dangerous actually to female law enforcement officers, because they are the ones who are having to go out there and engage with these men and do enough in terms of the conversations and things like that to actually be able to make an arrest in those cases. And it is a challenge because it is hard and does put our trained officers in harm's way and in situations that can get out of control very quickly. And so I think there's more that we can do as a community, and I think some of this is education and things like that. But as Lakeisha said, jail is, but in conjunction with, I think, education, because I think that there is a lot of work to be done on that front. There are some nonprofits who are trying to do what they call disrupts the that side of the Human Trafficking and Commercial Sex Acts. But so there is more work, I think, that we can do.
And we do undercover work as well. So we got some really bold female officers who do some, Actually, because of my experience early on in my career, I thought that I wanted to do something undercover. So when I went to the training, I quickly realized that that was something I couldn't do because of the triggers. But we do some undercover work.
Do you want to tell him?
No, you
go.
go.
You want to tell him? No, because Kristin left a lovely report on my desk that she had done some research on many years ago. And she did all the math, right? I've still got to run through it, but a woman is 400% more likely to be arrested for prostitution than a man is for solicitation. Right. So there's a lot of work to be done, and what that looks like. I've read a little bit about the laws and what it takes to charge a person who's purchasing sex. It is significant. Like, the full act has to be completed.
Not the full acts, but it does.
But not with an officer,
but
with
yeah.
Not with an officer. But no, like the woman is being arrested for solicitation,
right.
But you have to. I don't have a full understanding of law, but I'm looking into it. I'm trying to do some more research on it and see if things have shifted over the years, and see if some things are happening. But no, this is a demand and supply issue. If there wasn't a need for, if there wasn't a demand, there wouldn't be a need for women or boys that are being exploited. So if people weren't purchasing sex, we wouldn't have people being exploited for sex. So what is the real issue is here is, why are our Why are men buying sex?
Yeah.
And it's not men as a whole, but it's 99% of men are buyers, or 99% of buyers are men. So why aren't we talking to our boys about how they treat women, or how, you know, people are property, or how you don't need to purchase sex, or, you know, strip clubs are not a rite of passage. You know, pornography is not something, it is not healthy for a mature sex life. It is not healthy for mature relationships and having well-developed relationships. Like, this is not how we go about having those things. So how are we engaging our children and having these conversations with our children? Like, it's okay to have Kane, and my daughter, 6 years old, has a book called C is for Consent. It's okay. Like, we can have these candid conversations with our children, because that's what's happening, is we're just masking it. We're walking around the real issues, and this in society is saying, hey, it's okay to spend $271 million a day on the purchasing of people, because it's a taboo conversation and we don't want to talk about it. So,
I was reading the article, and it talks about how to end the demand to stop human trafficking, and it mentioned the high reward, low risk dynamic, meaning traffickers, they expect to make a lot of money, but they have minimum fear of punishment and consequences. So
I know in Nassau County, like, we were out in the community, and then this was last Wednesday. There was a sting, and they arrested 11 men for buying sex because they thought they were going to show up and find a 14-year-old. And it was like a person in the army, and I mean, just like people don't really think about who the buyer is, but it's like across the board.
They're just people.
Yeah.
They are our men. Like, again, kind of like rehumanizing all elements of this. Like, our buyers are our men and women, like 1%, you know, but I think it's like really important for us to, while punishment is engaged, it's like what unmet need leads a man to want to purchase sex, and where and how, what's dealing with that, right? And where are the options for men who struggle with that, who are tempted to purchase sex? There is so much shame around being a John, and so much fear. It lives in that secrecy, and so then they don't ever receive any help. They just hide in the shadows and purchase sex. It's like, can we actually like equip people to meet their needs in a healthy way? This is, again, speaking from obviously my lens, but I like, these are humans. Every element of this are like human people who have brothers and parents and friends.
And I'm sitting here fuming because I don't see, for a long time I didn't see my abuser as human. I see him as inhumane. So, but I'm listening to you.
No, yeah, no, it is really hard.
Yes.
It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing, and again, it's easy for me to speak from my lens in that way. Yeah. And I think it's like, what led a human to be so inhumane, right? Like, even that man was once a child.
Okay, yeah, and then we'll take one from online.
You had given a profile of what creates a victim of sexual trafficking. What's the profile of the man that does that sort of thing? How can he, pinpoint the type of woman that would be a good client or employee of his?
From the purchaser, like the buyer, the trafficker.
Yeah. I think it's very basic, like when you would have business development skills, right? When you would go into a room and you would say, hey, this is the person I'm going to talk to, and this is how I'm going to connect with them. It's just a distorted view of that, right? Like when you're connecting with somebody and you're bonding with them and you're finding things that you connect with them on, or maybe have you ever walked into a room and you're like, this is the person I'm going to go talk to, right? Am I the only one? No. Am I the only one that does that?
There's my person.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just something you sense about this person, right? Most people, and so I think it's just a manipulated, distorted view of what you would do with a talent like that, I guess. I don't know. I'm able to read people when I walk into a room.
I remember some of our women telling us that they were, like one of our women was working as a cashier at a retail store. This guy came through her line and said, "How are you?" And she told him how she really was, and it opened the door.
Yeah.
Like, right there, he knows her vulnerabilities. It was just having a conversation with someone. Yeah. Anyone else have anything on that? So is there a particular area in Duval County that has a high rate of human trafficking, or is it spread throughout the city?
I'm not sure.
I only know from my research.
I was going to say, I know from the cases I've worked that there are some kind of corridors that are where it is more common. A lot of them are the hotels where they're easy to rent, where you can rent them, and I guess it's around the hotels really is where it is, because it allows the trafficker to have a place for the dates to happen, for the commercial sex acts to happen, if they provide roofs over their heads, and if they get kicked out of one hotel, because some hotels will know when there's high traffic in the rooms, they'll put them on a do not rent list, and they'll just go across the street to the next hotel. And so it is these neighborhoods and these parts of town where there are numerous hotels close
in low
together.
income areas too.
Yeah.
And low budget hotels.
Yeah, they're called like motels, right? So it's like
Motels.
$50 a night, right? So
Right.
you have Arlington Expressway, you have Southside Boulevard, you have Airport Road, you have Lane Avenue, Dunn Avenue, you have JTB, 295, you have Phillips Highway, Youngerman Circle.
There you go, Stephanie.
In addition to
It's
that,
across the city of Jacksonville.
yeah, and in those same motels, they typically have other crime-related issues too. You have your drugs, your gang activity. So,
Well, because it's a hub of vulnerabilities as well. It's a hub of vulnerable people. It's low-income areas. It's people who are suffering from drug and alcohol abuse, or maybe they identify with the LGBTQ community, or maybe they're experiencing homelessness. It's a hub of vulnerabilities, and this is where they will flock to. So,
And then our women will tell us, like I was with one of our women and we were doing a training in the Hyatt downtown, and she's like, I was trafficked here.
Yeah.
Or we drive past a hotel and she's like, I was trafficked, and they're like, I've done this work forever and I'm still in like disbelief sometimes about how much it happens. One of our women said, I would guarantee it almost happens at every hotel in our city. It's just astounding to me still. All right. Does anyone have a question in the audience? What time is it? Oh gosh, we got one time for one more question. Does anyone have one final question? Yeah.
But to what you were saying about the low budget hotels and stuff, I had an employee. It's probably about
the mic so they can hear you.
3 years ago since I had this employee. I'm sorry. I had an employee, probably it's been about 3 years since she's worked for me, and come to find out after, because I'm very small, my company's very small, and so I had like 3 employees at the time, and this one girl that I hired, I don't know why she opened up to me, but she did, and she had been trafficked, did I say that right? But where she was the Aloft Hotel over at Southside, where Starbucks and all that stuff is. I mean, it's not a super fancy hotel, but it's not the hood either.
no,
You know what I
there's a whole
mean?
gang of them back there.
And the guy that had trafficked her actually flew them to some kind of, I don't know, motorcycle event or something like that. But when you were talking about how, or one of you was talking about how with the drugs, how they wait until they just need it so bad, that is exactly how they did her. She said they would be begging at the door. It was her and another girl, and they were kept separated and all this kind of stuff. But they could not wait for that man to get there to give them their drugs. So I don't really feel like it's always in the hood or in the low income thing. I feel like it can be in the, maybe not at the Ritz, but I don't think a lot of times.
That's just a different.
Okay. But yeah,
whole
I don't
different
think we should
business.
think it's always in the lower income, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well,
I think it happens in a little bit nicer places too.
And the reality is not all the commercial sex acts and dates happen in the hotels. There's also what are called out calls, where the trafficker actually is driving the girl to a date, and those happen all over the city, homes, neighborhoods, nice ones, expensive ones, low income, you name it, and that is where those dates happen.
All right, so I'm going to have our panelists share something extremely hopeful and leave our audience with like a word for them to take. Okay, up here on the screen is our, oh my gosh, I realize we don't have that on the tables. Do we have those, Heather, this QR code? They're actually up here. Okay. So this is the QR code. If you're online, you can scan this QR code and it'll take you to a link. Can you pass that around, Heather? Yep. And it'll take you to a link, and you can sign up to take the training. And we'll send you a link to become part of the 100% Club. So I'm going to let the panelists give the last word for the evening. If you want to.
I will just say thank you all for coming. It's very important that all of you are here, and it says a lot for our community that you all are here and wanting to learn more and be a part of this, because without you all and people being willing to be educated and wanting to be educated, we would be in the same position we've been in years and years ago. So thank you all.
I guess like, because I know I've shared a little bit of my experience with you guys, and we've shared a lot of hard stuff today, and and it can be really daunting when you think about human trafficking as a whole and sex trafficking in our city and what that looks like, and and it's really hard to think about people who have ended up in these experiences. So I'll just share, because since being out of the life, I left the life in 2016, and so I just want to share, and I hate to do it because it feels like boasting, right? But I just when you. And we're losing all of that choice, and when we take down those labels that we give on people, and we present people with opportunity. Last year I was awarded Survivor Advocate of the Year for the state of Florida, and this year, I hate to do it, and this year, in the city of Jacksonville, your city has built a council, and I was appointed to the Sex Trafficking Survivor Leadership Council for the city of Jacksonville. Your city is a part of a movement, and so my hope is that you guys will take this panel right here, and you guys will take this knowledge right here and be a part of the movement that is happening in the city of Jacksonville. And so that is my real hope, is that you guys are a part of something much bigger than just tonight. So thank you guys for being here.
I have to go behind you. I'm glad I went first. No, what I always say is that you've heard the stories of some survivors tonight, and you know that survivors are being rethreaded at this organization. I would just say that, a lot of times we see survivors and we see that they have overcome, they have a good life, and I'm talking about myself, and I would just say that although I have, it's a continuous healing. So once you survive something, you live with it for the rest of your life. We have chosen to live with it in a way that it gives back, but the trauma and the scars will forever be there. So with this training, you will be a voice, you will be more aware, and just those tools could potentially save someone's life. Save someone's life from being involved or a victim of human trafficking. And save them from having and living a life of trauma. So just think about that. Just you being informed, aware, and having a voice will potentially save somebody's life. Thank you.
So good. My turn now. I guess that other piece of hope is like healing is possible. Like that same thing where these humans carry their scars with them, absolutely. And that doesn't mean they have like a crappy life now. Like they absolutely have the opportunity to heal and grow from them. They gain perspective that a lot of us, it blows my mind the work that I do every day with people, and I get this amazing opportunity to watch people overcome enormous things and heal and grow. And so, like everyone else has said, you guys get to like play a part in that and be people, looking at people, interacting with people, rescuing people, and participate in their healing, even by someone who asks a question, later on in their healing, finding out after the fact, all kinds of different ways that you can, in your day-to-day, as you are going throughout your life, like leave an actual impact in a lot of people's lives. So thank you.
And we encourage you to take the training. If you are an individual or a person who works at a business, we want you to bring your business here. We want you to participate in the Reclaim the Light volunteer experience. It's either 3 hours in the morning or 3 hours in the afternoon. It's led by Stephanie and her team, and we would love to have you guys involved in this and go through it, and then also take the hour-long training. And I just want to say thank you so much. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to First Lady Molly Curry for using your position at First Lady to do so much good in our city, and for having this vision for survivors to have their experience rethreaded so they can do good. So thank you for elevating their stories and for investing in us and for changing our city. Thank you so much. And then thank you to our panelists so much for your perspective, your knowledge, your love, and your hope and your inspiration. So thank you guys so much. We're just going to give them a round of applause. Yes, and now we're free. So we'll send out an email. If we didn't get to answer the questions, we'll send an email with the answers to the questions, and also another link to the training and a link to take the volunteer experience. So thank you guys.